Sophia Clark was going to get lucky tonight. Her psychology seminar had been canceled at the last minute, which meant a free Friday night. She decided to surprise Michael, her boyfriend of the past 2 years. As she drove up to the Clark family mansion in the Boston suburbs, she anticipated how excited Michael would be to see her earlier than usual. He'd been living in the guest house on the estate since Sophia's father, James Clark, had hired him at his investment firm. Sophia's silver BMW came to a smooth stop in the driveway. The girl's rearview mirror critically examined her reflection. Her dark brown hair was gathered into a careless bun, a little mascara on her eyelashes and light lip gloss, quite enough for an evening at home. She walked quietly across the backyard to the guest house, noticing that the lights were on inside, even though the curtains were drawn. Strange, she thought. Michael always liked natural light and only pulled the curtains when he went to bed. Standing at the door, she heard muffled voices. The male she recognized immediately, it was Michael, but the female voice. Sophia froze. It was Catherine's voice, her stepmother's. Why was the stepmother in the guest house with her boyfriend? Sophia slowly turned the doorknob, hoping the creak wouldn't give away her presence. The door opened silently. "We have to be more careful, Michael. James is beginning to suspect something," she heard Catherine's voice. "I think he's too busy to notice anything. Sophia's different. She's too observant." Sophia felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. She stepped inside the house and saw a scene that broke her heart. Catherine sat on Michael's bed, wearing only his shirt, and Michael himself, naked to the waist, stood beside her, holding a glass of wine. "Sophia!" Michael exclaimed, dropping the glass to the floor. The red wine spread across the light-colored carpet like blood. Catherine jumped up, frantically trying to pull her shirt down. "Darling, it's not at all what you think," she began. Sophia stood there, unable to utter a word. Her gaze slid around the room, the scattered clothes, the 2 empty wine bottles, the crumpled bed. All these details added up to a picture that could not be misinterpreted. "How long has this been going on?" Sophia finally squeezed out. Michael and Catherine exchanged quick glances. "Sophia, let's talk calmly." Michael took a step toward her, but she backed away. "Stay away from me." Her voice shook with anger and pain. I asked, "How long has this been going on?" 3 months, Catherine answered quietly, lowering her eyes. "We didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened." "It just happened?" Sophia repeated with a bitter laugh. "You married my father less than a year ago. And you, Michael?" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Sophia, I didn't mean to hurt you." Michael looked genuinely upset, but something in his eyes said that he was more concerned about being exposed than hurting her. "Oh, don't worry. You didn't hurt me," Sophia said coldly, feeling shock replace rage. "You betrayed me. You both betrayed me, and my father will find out today." Catherine's face turned pale. "Wait, Sophia. Let's talk like adults. Your father doesn't deserve this kind of shock." "Grown-ups?" Sophia grinned. "Grown men don't sleep with their stepdaughters' boyfriends, and they don't lie to their girlfriends." She turned to leave, but Michael grabbed her arm. "Sophia, listen to me. It's more complicated than it looks. Your father. He's not who he says he is." Sophia pulled her hand away. "Don't you dare talk about my father like that. You're both disgusting." She ran out of the cabin, slamming the door. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she ran across the garden to the main house. Michael made no attempt to catch up with her. When she reached her room, Sophia locked the door and collapsed on the bed. Her world was crumbling before her eyes. Michael was the only person she trusted completely after the death of her mother, a Catherine. Though she'd never considered her a mother, she thought there was a mutual respect between them. Sophia cried for almost an hour before she heard a knock on the door. It was Catherine. "Sophia, please, let's talk. Go away. Your father will be home in 2 hours. We need to talk before he gets home." Sophia opened the door. Catherine had already changed and looked as flawless as ever. Only her reddened eyes gave away her excitement. "What are you saying? That you have an excuse for sleeping with my boyfriend?" Catherine walked into the room and closed the door behind her. "There are no excuses," she said quietly. "But there are explanations. Your father, he and I haven't slept together in almost 6 months. He's completely absorbed in his work. I'm just an ornament, a trophy." And that gives you the right to cheat? Sophia shook her head. Why did you marry him then? Catherine lowered her eyes. You know the position I was in. Divorced, broke, with huge debts after my ex-husband's bankruptcy. James offered me salvation. And Michael? What is he? Just a convenient replacement for my father? No. Michael is different. He understands me. Catherine looked up at Sophia. I know how that sounds, but it's true. Sophia felt a new wave of rage. And that's why he dated me for 2 years? To be closer to you? No, Sophia. It started a while ago, I swear. At that moment, there was another knock on the door. It was Michael. Sophia didn't want to see him, but Catherine opened the door. We need to decide what to do, he said as he entered the room. Sophia, I understand how you feel, but please let's discuss this calmly. What is there to discuss? Sophia asked bitterly. You both lied to me, betrayed my father. Your father is no saint, Sophia, Michael said abruptly. You don't know half of what goes on in his company, what he makes me do. What are you talking about? Not now, Michael, Catherine said warningly. Michael ignored her. Money laundering, document fraud. I know all this because I'm involved in it, on his orders. Sophia shook her head. You're lying. You're trying to smear him to justify yourself. I have proof, Michael said firmly. And if you tell him about Catherine and me, I'll go to the police with that evidence. There was a heavy silence in the room. Are you blackmailing me? Sophia finally asked. I'm trying to protect all of us, Michael replied. You have no idea what your father would do if he knew the truth. Sophia looked at him with new eyes. The man she had loved and trusted now seemed a complete stranger to her. Get out of my room, both of you, she said quietly. I need to think. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. James Clark came home at 8 o'clock sharp, as promised. He was a tall, trim man with graying at the temples, and he exuded confidence and strength. At dinner, Catherine was especially attentive, giving her husband the best bites and keeping the conversation going. Michael, as usual on Fridays, joined the family dinner, but sat silent, only occasionally answering James's questions about work. Sophia barely touched her food. She watched the spectacle, feeling disgust growing inside her. You've been quiet today, dear, James remarked, turning to his daughter. Did something happen at the university? No, Dad. Sophia smiled, strained. I'm just tired. A lot of studying. You work too hard, James said. You're like me. He smiled proudly and put his hand on Catherine's arm. Sophia noticed that she tensed slightly at the touch, but kept smiling. By the way, James continued, I have some good news. Michael, your work on Project Aurora has been impressive. I think it's time to promote you. Michael looked up from his plate. Thank you, sir. I'm glad you're pleased. More than pleased, James nodded. You've become almost like a son to me. Sophia almost choked on her water. Almost like a son, she thought, and sleeping with your wife. Sophia, are you okay? Father asked worriedly. Yeah, I just got the water down the wrong throat, she replied, avoiding Michael's gaze. Dad, can I talk to you after dinner? Alone. Catherine and Michael visibly tensed. Of course, dear, James replied. Is it something important? Yes, Sophia said simply, looking directly at her stepmother. Catherine stood up abruptly. I'll get dessert. Michael, will you give me a hand? They walked out into the kitchen, leaving Sophia alone with her father. What's going on, Sophia? James asked, lowering his voice. I can see that something is wrong. Sophia opened her mouth, ready to tell him everything, but hesitated at the last moment. What if Michael isn't bluffing? What if he really does have proof of her father's illegal activities? And what if her father really is capable of what Michael was implying? I just, wanted to ask about Mom, she lied. I've been thinking about her a lot lately. James's face softened. Oh, Sophia, it's been 5 years, but I know you're still hurting. So do I. Elizabeth was an amazing woman. Did you love her? For real? James looked at her in surprise. Of course. She was the love of my life. Why do you ask? And Catherine, do you love her? James frowned. Sophia, why these questions? Just answer them, please. James was silent for a moment and then said quietly, Catherine is a good woman. She got me through the hardest time. She takes care of our home, of me. It's a different feeling, not like your mom. but it's love too. Sophia felt a prick of guilt. Her father seemed sincere. Catherine and Michael returned with dessert. The tension at the table could have been cut with a knife, but James seemed oblivious as he talked passionately about the new business project. After dinner, Michael said a quick goodbye and left for the guest house. Catherine went to the bedroom, citing a headache. Sophia remained in the living room, staring into the darkness outside the window. Her cell phone vibrated. A new message from an unknown number. "I know what happened today. There's information you'll be interested in. Meet me tomorrow at noon at an abandoned bowling center outside of town. Come alone." Sophia reread the message several times. Who would know about today's events? And what kind of information did this person have? It could be a trap. But something told her that behind this message, there was a clue to unravel this whole confusing situation. Sophia decided to go along with the meeting. After all, what did she have to lose? Her world had already been shattered. Little did she know that this decision would change everything once and for all. The afternoon in Boston was overcast and cool. Sophia parked her car a block away from the abandoned bowling center, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. She'd spent a sleepless night going over and over in her head the events of yesterday, the message from John Doe, and the possible consequences of her decision. The abandoned Lucky 9 bowling center had closed about 3 years ago. The once popular place now stood boarded up, with a faded sign and broken windows. Sophia walked around the building and found the service entrance door ajar. She hesitated for a second, then pushed the door open and stepped inside. The inside smelled damp and dusty. Rays of light filtered through the gaps in the boarded-up windows, making differently shaped spots on the floor. Sophia walked cautiously along the wall, holding the phone in her hand with the flashlight on. "Is anyone there?" she called out, trying to make her voice sound confident. "Glad you came," came a voice from the darkness. It was male, deep, with a slight hoarseness. A man of about 35, tall, with dark hair and stubble on his face, stepped out of the shadows. He was dressed in dark jeans and a gray sweatshirt. In his hand, he held a folder. "Who are you?" Sophia asked, keeping her distance. "My name is Alex Morgan. I'm a detective with the Boston Police Department." He showed her his ID. "And I'm investigating your father's activities." Sophia felt the ground slipping from under her feet. "My father? What do you mean?" Morgan pointed to a bench against the wall. "Let's sit down. It's going to be a long conversation." Sophia walked uncertainly toward the bench, keeping her distance between herself and the detective. "James Clark has been under surveillance for over a year now," Morgan began. "We suspect him of money laundering, tax evasion, and stock market manipulation, but he's careful, very careful." "Why are you telling me this?" Sophia asked, feeling the anger building inside her. "If you have proof, arrest him." "That's just it." Morgan opened the folder. "Evidence isn't enough. Your father uses frontmen, clean companies, and carefully disguises his tracks. But recently, a lead came to light. He held out a photograph to her. It showed Michael handing an envelope to a man whose face wasn't visible. "Your boyfriend is deeply involved in your father's affairs. He runs the most sensitive errands. And more recently, he's been gathering information against James. Insurance, so to speak." Sophia remembered what Michael said about evidence. "How do you know about Michael? And me?" Morgan grinned sadly. "It's my job to know, and I know about last night's incident, about your stepmother and Michael." Sophia felt the color flood her face. "You're following me?" "Not you specifically. Everyone connected to your father, including his family," Morgan said quietly. "Sophia, I know how this sounds, but you're in danger." "In danger? From who?" "From your father. He's ruthless to those who betray his trust." Morgan pulled out another photograph. "This man was your father's accountant. He threatened to go to the IRS. They found him dead a week later. The official story is suicide, but I know for a fact it was murder." Sophia stared at the photograph, feeling a chill run down her spine. "You're accusing my father of murder? That's absurd. Your father doesn't get his hands dirty by himself. He has people who do his dirty work, including Michael." Sophia stood up, feeling her knees trembling. "I don't believe you. Michael is not a murderer." "Maybe," Morgan nodded, "but he knows about a lot of things. And now that he's involved with your father's wife, his life hangs in the balance. And so will yours. if you decide to tell your father the truth. What do you want from me? Help, Morgan replied simply. I need inside information, and you can provide it. You're asking me to spy on my own father? I'm asking you to help stop a dangerous man before someone else gets hurt. Morgan held out a small device to her. It's a secure phone. Use it to contact me if you learn anything important. Sophia took the phone, feeling like a traitor. I need to think about it. Of course, Morgan nodded. But don't take too long. Time is working against us. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. At the same time, Catherine and Michael met at a small cafe on the edge of town. They sat in the far corner, trying not to attract attention. Are you sure we're not being followed? Catherine asked nervously, looking around. I'm sure, Michael answered, though he wasn't really sure. He had been feeling someone's eyes on him for the past few weeks. What did Sophia say to James yesterday? Nothing. She changed her mind at the last minute. Catherine sipped her coffee. But it was just a reprieve. She could blow the whistle at any moment. We have to convince her to keep quiet. Michael drummed his fingers nervously on the table. I have enough information to put James behind bars for years. That's a strong argument. You're forgetting that she loves her father, Catherine countered, and she hates us now. Then what are you suggesting? Catherine thought, maybe we should leave. Start over somewhere far away from here. Michael shook his head. Empty-handed, James will find us and destroy us. No, we need insurance, and I have it. Catherine looked at him carefully. What are you up to, Michael? I copied all the documents proving his illegal operations, plus tapes of his conversations. Michael lowered his voice. I know where he's hiding the cash, millions of dollars in several vaults. Are you suggesting we rob him? Catherine asked incredulously. I'm suggesting that we take what's owed to us and disappear, Michael replied. Then Sophia can tell him anything. We won't be here anymore. You're crazy, Catherine whispered, but there was a flicker of interest in her eyes. When do you want to do it? Tonight. James is going to New York for the weekend. The house will be empty. Michael took her hand. It's our only chance, Catherine. Catherine was silent, weighing all the risks. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but if anything goes wrong, we will retreat immediately. Promise me. I promise. Michael kissed her hand. At midnight. Be ready. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. James Clark was sitting in his office reviewing paperwork when his secretary announced the call. Mr. Clark, it's P.I. Raymond. He says it's urgent. James picked up the phone. Go ahead. I have some information that will interest you, the voice on the other end said. It's about your wife. James straightened up in his chair. I'm listening. Not over the phone. I have photos and notes. I can have them here in an hour. I'm waiting, James answered briefly and hung up. He looked thoughtfully at the photograph on the table. It was of him, Sophia, and Catherine, taken on their wedding day. Catherine was smiling, but her eyes remained cold. James always noticed it, but ignored it. She was a beautiful trophy, nothing more. Exactly 1 hour later, Detective Raymond, a short, full man with balding hair, sat in James's office. I've been following your wife for 2 weeks, as you requested, he said, opening the briefcase. And I found this. He laid a series of photographs on the table. They showed Catherine entering the guest house, hugging Michael, kissing him. James stared at the photos with a stone face. When were these taken? Yesterday, and a week ago, and 2 weeks ago, Raymond replied. These are regular meetings, usually when you're at work or away. James picked up one of the pictures. It showed Catherine and Michael sitting in a cafe, holding hands. And this one? Today, about 2 hours ago, the detective replied. I couldn't hear them talking, but they looked excited, planning something. James nodded. Is there anything else? Yes, Raymond pulled out a small voice recorder. I managed to get a wire in the guest house. Here's a recording of their last date. He pressed a button, and the room was filled with the sounds of passionate moans and whispers. James listened nonchalantly, but his fingers, clutching the arm of the chair, turned white. That's enough, he said when the tape became particularly explicit. How much do I owe you? We agreed on $5,000, Raymond replied. James opened the safe, took out an envelope and threw it on the table. Here's 10, For promptness, the detective stood up. "If you need any more of my services, I'll be in touch," James finished. "Now leave me alone." When the detective left, James sat still for a long time, staring at the photographs. Then he pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said when he got the answer. "We have a problem. Michael and my wife." "Yes, I'm sure." "No, I'll take care of it myself. Tonight." He hung up the phone and walked to the window. The sun was already setting, coloring the Boston sky blood red. James looked out at the city as if seeing it for the last time. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sophia arrived home late that night. After her meeting with Detective Morgan, she wandered around the city for a long time, trying to gather her thoughts. Could she believe that her father was a criminal? That Michael was involved in something so horrible? And what to do with that information now? The house greeted her with an unaccustomed silence. There was a light on in the living room, but no one was in sight. "Dad? Catherine?" Sophia called out. No one answered. On the table in the hallway, she noticed a note written in her father's handwriting. "Gone to New York for the weekend. Be back Monday. Catherine is staying with her sister. Love, Daddy." Sophia breathed a sigh of relief. At least she wouldn't have to lie to anyone today. She went up to her room, threw her bag on her bed, and walked to the window. From it, she could see the guest house. The lights were on, which meant Michael was home. The phone in her pocket vibrated. A message from Michael. "We need to talk. It's important. Come to the guest house when you can." Sophia hesitated. Part of her wanted to never see Michael again. Another part craved an explanation, an understanding of what was going on. In the end, curiosity won out. She made her way downstairs and headed toward the guest house. Her father wasn't home anyway, so he wouldn't know about her visit. As she approached the door, she noticed it was ajar. Sophia gently pushed it open and stepped inside. "Michael?" she called out. No one answered. The cabin was quiet, only the clock on the wall ticking. Sophia walked further into the bedroom. The door was closed. "Michael, are you there?" She knocked, but there was no answer. Sophia pushed the door open and froze on the threshold. The room was turned upside down. Drawers pulled out, things strewn across the floor. It was as if someone had been looking for something. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a body on the bed, curled up in an unnatural position. Blood soaked the sheets and dripped onto the floor, forming a dark puddle. Sophia screamed. Asterisk, 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 Detective Alex Morgan drove to the crime scene, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. The call had come in 20 minutes ago. A body had been found in the guest house of the Clark mansion. The patrolman who'd called homicide was the first to arrive on the scene. Morgan knew the house. He'd been watching it for months, gathering evidence against James Clark. And today, something went wrong. As he approached the mansion, he saw several police cars with blinkers and an ambulance. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape. Morgan showed his badge to the officer at the entrance and entered the grounds. His partner, Detective Lena Chen, was already in place. "What do we got?" Morgan asked as he approached her. "Victim is male, 24 years old," Chen replied. "Preliminary cause of death is multiple stab wounds. Time of death between 9 o'clock and 11 p.m. Who found the body?" "Sophia Clark, the daughter of the homeowner." Chen nodded toward the ambulance where a pale, shivering Sophia sat. "She's in shock." The paramedics gave her a sedative. Morgan walked over to Sophia. She raised empty eyes to him, not immediately recognizing him. "Miss Clark, I'm Detective Morgan. We met this afternoon, remember?" Sophia nodded slowly. The detective... "He's dead. Michael is dead." "I know," Morgan said softly. "I'm so sorry. Can you tell me what happened?" I got a message from him. He wanted to talk. I came and found him there." Sophia trembled even more. "Who could have done this?" "We'll find out," Morgan assured her. "Where's your father?" New York. He went away for the weekend." "And your stepmother?" "At my sister's. At least that's what the note said." Morgan nodded. "Get some rest. We'll talk later." He walked back to the guest house, pulled on gloves and booties and stepped inside. Forensics were already at work, photographing the crime scene and gathering evidence. The body was lying on the bed, covered by a sheet. Morgan carefully lifted it. A young man with dark hair lay on his side, his eyes wide open as if in surprise. Multiple wounds covered his chest and abdomen. Preliminary reports indicate at least 15 blows, said the medical examiner, Dr. Casey. The killer was furious, or really wanted to make sure the victim was dead. Murder weapon? Judging from the wounds, a knife with a narrow blade, possibly hunting or combat. Not a kitchen knife, that's for sure, Casey said. We'll get more information in the autopsy. Morgan nodded and began to look around the room. The clutter suggested that someone was looking for something. 3 days later, Detective Alex Morgan sat in his office studying the evidence board for the Michael Reed murder case, the crime scene photos, snapshots of the victim, the timeline, the relationship chart, all carefully organized, creating a visual map of the investigation. But something eluded him, some detail that should have connected all the dots. Lena Chen entered the office with 2 cups of coffee. "You've been here all night?" she asked, holding out one of the cups to him. Morgan rubbed his tired eyes. "Yes, something's bugging me about this case." "Ballistics results on the gun found in James Clark's office." Chen put the folder on the table. "Doesn't match the bullets from the Morrison case. So we couldn't connect Clark to the murder of his former accountant," Morgan sighed. "What about the financial records we seized during the search? Our experts are still working on them, but so far they haven't found anything criminal. Clark has very good accountants." Morgan stood up and walked over to the board. "Let's go over everything we have again. Michael Reed, 24 years old, worked for James Clark, dated his daughter Sophia, secretly had an affair with Clark's wife, Catherine. Sophia found out the day before the murder. According to the autopsy, the death occurred between 9 and 11 p.m., Chen added. Multiple stab wounds inflicted with great force. That suggests a crime of rage, possibly jealousy. Which gives us 3 suspects, Morgan nodded. James Clark, who may have found out about his wife's infidelity. Sophia Clark, who was betrayed by her boyfriend. And Catherine Clark, who might have had a motive of her own. But they all have alibis for the time of the murder, Chen noted. James claims he was at a business meeting in town, and his partner confirms his word. Catherine was at her sister's, which is also corroborated, and Sophia was at the university library, and several students saw her there. Morgan shook his head. James's alibi is only based on the word of his business partner, who could have lied. Sister Catherine could be covering for her. And Sophia... He fell silent, looking at a photograph of a young girl. She'd found the body and called the police. If she was the killer, why would she do that? To avert suspicion from herself? Chen suggested. Or she really is innocent. There's something else. Morgan took a small transparent bag with an earring from the table. This earring was found in the guest house bathroom. It belongs to Catherine, but was lost before the day of the murder, according to her. Do you believe her? I don't know, Morgan answered honestly. But I do know that everyone in this case is hiding something. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sophia Clark sat in the interrogation room, nervously tugging at the sleeve of her sweater. She'd changed a lot in the last 3 days, pale, gaunt, and with a look of constant worry in her eyes. Morgan came into the room and sat down across from her. Thank you for coming in, Miss Clark. Did I have a choice? Sophia grinned bitterly. There's always a choice, Morgan replied calmly. You could have come with a lawyer. I don't need a lawyer. I didn't kill Michael. Morgan nodded. I know the last few days have been hard on you, but I need your help to find the killer. Sophia swallowed. What do you want to know? Tell me again about the day of the murder. You received a message from Michael, correct? Yes, around 9 p.m. He said we needed to talk, that it was important. And you went to see him right away? Sophia shook her head. No, I was angry with him because of that situation with Catherine. I didn't want to see him, but eventually we did. Yeah, about an hour later. I thought maybe he wanted to apologize or explain something. Morgan watched her face carefully. What were you doing that night before you got the message? I was in the university library, studying for exams. Can anyone confirm that? A few classmates saw me there. Morgan nodded and made a note in his notebook. Sophia, I have to ask you a direct question. When you found out about Michael's affair with your stepmother, what did you think about? Sophia lowered her eyes. I was furious. I felt betrayed, deceived. At first I wanted to tell my father, to punish them both, but then Michael told me that he had evidence of my father's illegal activities, and that if I told my father about him and Catherine, he'd go to the police. Morgan straightened up. This is important, Sophia. What kind of evidence did he have exactly? I don't know exactly. He said something about money laundering, forging documents. Said his father forced him into it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. James Clark entered the interrogation room with the confidence of a man used to being in control. In an expensive suit, with impeccable posture, he looked like a successful businessman, not a murder suspect. Detective Morgan, this is getting annoying, he said, sitting down. I've already testified twice. I have a business to run. I appreciate your time, Mr. Clark, Morgan replied, but there are new questions. I have an alibi for the time of the murder. I was in a business meeting with Richard Lancaster. Yes, we spoke to Mr. Lancaster. Interestingly, he's been your business partner for 15 years. A very loyal man, isn't he? James frowned slightly. What's your point, detective? My point is that a man like that would lie for you. Morgan opened the folder. Mr. Clark, when did you find out about your wife's affair with Michael Reed? James froze for a moment, then answered calmly, I didn't know about it until after he was murdered. Really? Morgan pulled a photograph out of the folder. This is you walking into P.I. Raymond's office on October 23rd, a week before the murder. James remained nonchalant. I hired him for another matter. What was it? It's confidential information related to my business. Morgan smiled. Then you'll be happy to know that we got a warrant to seize Detective Raymond's records, and you know what we found? Evidence that you hired him to watch your wife, and that on the day of the murder, he provided you with photos and audio of her cheating. Asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk. Catherine Clark was a surprise caller to the precinct asking to see Morgan. She was sitting in the interrogation room, looking exhausted and scared. I was on the run, she explained. I was afraid James would find me. Why were you afraid of your husband? Morgan asked. Because I'm sure he killed Michael, Catherine replied. That night, Michael and I planned to meet and leave together, start a new life. But I was late, and when I got to the guest house, the police were already there. Why didn't you come to us right away? Because I know James. He's got connections everywhere, even the police. I was afraid they'd just deliver me to him and I'd be the next victim. Morgan watched her carefully. Do you have proof that your husband killed Michael Reed? No. Catherine shook her head. But Michael had proof of James's illegal activities. He'd been collecting it for months. Documents, tapes of conversations. Where is that evidence now? I don't know. Michael was supposed to bring it to our meeting. Maybe James found it and destroyed it after the murder. Morgan made a note in his notebook. Mrs. Clark, where were you between 9 and 11 p.m. on the day of the murder? I was at my sister's, but then I drove to the guest house to meet Michael. My car broke down on the way, so I had to call a tow truck. We can check that out. We'll check it out, Morgan nodded. What can you tell me about Sophia? How did she react when she found out about your affair with Michael? Catherine sighed. She was furious, of course, devastated. Michael and I had done a terrible thing to her. I wouldn't be surprised if she told James everything. But she claims she didn't. Then how did James know? Catherine frowned. He certainly knew. A private investigator couldn't have provided him with photos and notes so quickly without preparation. Morgan hesitated for a moment. There were too many inconsistencies in this story. Everyone was telling their version, and they couldn't all be true. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That evening, Morgan received the forensic results of the earring found in the guest house. There were microscopic traces of blood on it that matched Michael Reed's blood type. This meant that the earring had been lost during or immediately after the murder, not before, as Catherine had claimed. He'd also gotten a report on Sophia's alibi check. The students had indeed seen her in the library, but only until 8 in the evening. After that, her whereabouts were not confirmed by anyone's testimony until after the body was discovered. Morgan called Sophia back to the station. The new evidence is forcing us to reevaluate the timeline of events, he said. Sophia, you weren't in the library at the time of the murder. Where were you really? Sophia turned pale. I was at home, in my room. Can anyone confirm that? No. Dad was supposed to be in New York, and Catherine was at her sister's. Morgan leaned forward. Sophia, I think you're hiding something important. Something that could help us find the killer. What is it? Sophia was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, I saw something that night. Something I shouldn't have seen. What was it? I lied about a message from Michael. There was no message. I went to the guest house because I saw my dad heading there. He looked weird and I was worried, so I followed him. Morgan tensed. What happened next? I didn't go in right away. I stood at the window trying to hear what they were talking about. They were fighting. My father was yelling about betrayal, about Michael stealing something from him and his wife and some documents. Then, she stopped talking. Her eyes filled with tears. Then I got scared and ran away. When I came back an hour later, Michael was dead. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I love my father, Sophia whispered. I didn't want to believe that he was capable of murder. Morgan straightened. Sophia, I want the whole truth. Did you see your father kill Michael? No, she exclaimed. I swear I didn't see the murder itself. I did leave and came back later. Morgan nodded. Good. But now we need to detain your father for questioning. That's serious evidence. *****, James Clark was arrested that same evening. His house was searched, but no bloody clothes or murder weapon was found. However, a thumb drive was found in his safe with documents proving financial fraud, exactly what Michael was talking about. Under questioning, James continued to deny any involvement in the murder. Yes, I was in the guest house that night. Yes, we were arguing. But when I left, Michael was alive. Someone must have come after me. Who do you think? Morgan asked. Catherine, James answered. She was supposed to meet him there. Why would she kill the man she was planning to run away with? Because she never planned to run away with him. James grinned bitterly. Catherine used him to get to my money. Once he handed her all the documents and evidence against me, she got rid of him. Morgan frowned. Do you have proof of that? Check her bank accounts. Secret accounts I didn't know about. You'll find large sums transferred over the last month. *****. A check of the bank accounts did indeed reveal a hidden account in Catherine's name in a Swiss bank, into which $5 million had been transferred 2 weeks ago. The source of the transfer had been carefully concealed through a series of shell companies. Morgan called Catherine back in for questioning. Explain the origin of this money, he demanded, showing her the documents. Catherine turned pale. I don't know anything about this account. I've never opened it. We have documents with your signature. It's a forgery, she exclaimed. James is trying to set me up. Why would he do that if you weren't a threat to him? Catherine was silent for a moment, then said quietly, Because I know he killed Michael, and I can prove it. How? I have a surveillance tape from the guest house. Michael installed it secretly from James for his own safety. It's on a cloud storage system that only I can access. It shows James throwing the first punch, but she stopped talking. But what? But there's something else. Something I didn't expect to see. *****. The camera footage changed everything. It did show James lunging at Michael with a knife in a rage, but it was only the first blow, not the fatal one. After that, another person appears in the footage, entering the room when James has already left and Michael, wounded, is trying to reach for the phone. That person was Sophia. The footage showed her calmly walking up to Michael, looking down at him and saying something. The camera was silent. She then picks up a knife, the same one James used to wound Michael, and stabs him the rest of the way, methodically, as if doing the necessary work. She then carefully wipes her fingerprints off the knife, leaving only her father's, changes her clothes. The footage shows her taking clean clothes out of her bag, and calls the police. Morgan stared at the footage in a daze. Chen, standing nearby, whispered, "Oh my God, perfect plan." She knew her father would go ballistic when he found out about the affair, maybe even set him up to find out, and used his anger as a cover for her own crime. Morgan finished. Michael had betrayed her and Catherine, and she'd decided to get revenge on both of them, he with death and her with prison for her complicity in James's financial crimes. And her father, thinking he'd killed Michael, started covering his tracks, thus making himself even more suspicious, Chen added. Morgan shook his head. Perfect plan, and we almost bought into it. Sophia Clark was arrested the same day. When she was shown the tape, she didn't deny her guilt. She sat in the interrogation room, stone-faced, like she was talking about someone else. He deserved it. They both deserved it. My mother died 5 years ago, and my father married this, a year later, woman. I tried to accept her, to be kind to her, and she repaid me by stealing my boyfriend. They both betrayed me. But your father didn't know about their affair until you arranged for him to find out, Morgan said. Sophia smiled a cold smile. Detective, my father is a murderer and a thief. He made Michael do his dirty work by threatening me. Do as I say or Sophia will get hurt, is what he used to say. I knew it all. I always knew what he was really like. I just didn't want to admit it until I caught Michael with Catherine. That's when it all came to a head. So this was revenge? All three of them at once? Call it what you want, Sophia shrugged. I call it justice. 6 months after Michael Reed's murder, Sophia Clark was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole for 25 years. James Clark received 15 years for financial crimes and attempted murder. Catherine Clark avoided jail time by agreeing to cooperate with the prosecution, but was stripped of all assets from her marriage to James. Detective Alex Morgan sat in his office rereading the latest letter from Sophia Clark. Detective, you think justice has been served, but the truth is, there were no innocents in this story. Each of us got what we deserved, and I have no regrets. Morgan closed the case file and set it back on the shelf. One more case was closed, but it remained in his mind forever as a reminder that sometimes the worst monsters hid behind a mask of innocence, and that revenge could be cold and calculated. Justice had been served, but at what cost?